Hello, crypto world! Welcome to the Chart Historian. My name is Justin, and on this channel I delve deep into crypto charts, exploring chart structures, fractals, and patterns. This is going to be an XRP video. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of exciting things happening. But before we get into what I believe is going to take place, and I think you should be aware of what I believe is going to take place, I want to do some myth busting. Folks, I have been bombarded, literally bombarded, by so many analysts using this fractal. I'll show you the fractal. Here, let me zoom out. It's way back over here in 2017. This structure right here. You may have seen it in logarithmic scale, something like this. And the thinking is we've had a move up already. Now we have been in this extended kind of sideways range-bound time. It hasn't dropped. So if we go back in time, one of the easiest things to do is spot this moment in XRP's history where it had a move up and then it had this consolidation, this pennant. Assuming we were going through this, that's what the argument is, we would then be going into something like this. While it is possible we are working on a new all-time high, and I definitely believe that is the case. I'll show you why I believe that that could be in the works right now. It is not going to be, and I repeat, it is not going to be something like this. Folks, there are a lot of good analysts using this, and it's a shame. I'll tell you why. This is bad fractal analysis. You should not be using this structure. I'm going to show you why. So let's copy this fractal and paste it onto today's chart and analyze how it's being used. Okay, so here is that fractal, and I've adjusted it to roughly match the timing, height, and depth on today's chart. This is the way I've seen it used for the most part. And sure, it looks like something similar. Hey, we moved up and now we're in this kind of sideways consolidation, this pennant, and now it's breaking out. That's what the other one did, right? Well, it must be the same thing. Bad, 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 false. I'll show you why. Okay, first off, this is not the same structure. Now, aligning it to here, let's assume that that is a good analytical way to do it. Although you would think that since this is the peak, it should be there. But let's say that this is the right way to do it. This is the correct place to line it up. And you do have some similarities. It pulls back, it does this wave, and then it moves up into this part, and maybe that's that part. Okay, well, from here, it continues to decline all the way to here, but we're using this fractal, at least this is the way I've seen it used for the most part, like this, when this is a bottoming out part right here on this structure. And there is no bottoming out part that resembles this. First off, this decline goes way longer than what this suggests. So let me stretch it to match today's decline with what the fractal would suggest. And if we did that, first off, no. This is not what people want to hear. This would continue to move on, and we would just be in the very beginning stages of something like this. This is not even the correct way to use this structure. But let's bring it back to the way it was. So look at this part right here. It has 3 waves. Those 3 waves are not random. This is important. Do we see those 3 waves here after it bottoms out? No, we just have this massive like conglomerate blob of a wave, and then it starts moving up. Folks, what's happening on today's chart is not what this fractal suggests. The main thing that's similar is that it's held its ground, it hasn't fallen, and that's what happened back in 2017. Good fractal analysis accounts for every part of the fractal versus the structure. None of this holistic, everything together nonsense. That's poor analysis. Okay, so I just showed you how that fractal doesn't match, and there's a reason why it doesn't match. Let me show you. So XRP has range-bound times, which are in these black boxes. Now, when this range-bound time repeats, it's the same idea repeating. It's a range-bound point in the chart, but the way it plays out is unique, and that's because when a fractal or a pattern repeats, the timing, height, and depth of that pattern is going to be unique or original to the new iteration of it. So these structures, believe it or not, do have a lot in common with each other. They just play out in a unique kind of way. So after the range-bound time, you have a bull run, which also repeats, and they repeat at different scales. We could see these were much shorter than this one. Same is true about these range-bound time. Look how long this range-bound time lasted compared to these other two. So after the bull run comes a decline. This always happens. After every single bull run, you will get a decline. So let's move along and show you how this structure over here in 2017, this is the hollowed structure that everyone and their brother is using right now. What it actually is a decline and a range-bound time. Notice how this range-bound time has 3 waves. Well, these 3 waves play out over and over again, and each range-bound time, it looks unique, but the same idea gets repeated. Let me show you what I'm talking about. We're starting here with this 2018 decline just because it's easier to see. So you have a series of 6 different fractals, at least that's the way I break it up, from A to F. Sometimes A is so small it's not visible on a day candle. These basic patterns, they play out uniquely, but they repeat. The same is true of the range-bound time. So this range-bound time, for instance, we have 3 fractals, or 3 waves, if you will. This first structure has 2 parts to it. It has the move up and move down, and then this bounce. Sometimes this bounce arches further down. In fractal 2, it has 3 waves, wave A, wave B, and wave C. And then fractal 3, it moves up to a peak, it then declines, and then recovers, does a smaller correction, then it goes into the bull run. So if we look back over here in 2017, let's zoom in, we can see that it has the declining structures, and then it has the range-bound structures. We can even see that the first fractal, the first wave in the range-bound time, has the move up, the move down, and then the bounce or the wave. And this one arched lower than it did in the 2018/19 one. In fractal 2, it has the 3 waves. Wave A, wave B is pathetic, but it still is a wave. You can see the parts where it dips low on each side, and then C. And then in fractal 3, it moves up to part A, and then it crashes or declines to part B. It then recovers, does a small correction, and goes into the bull run. So what is essentially happening when all these analysts use this structure, what they're doing is they're taking 2 repetitive sequences in the XRP chart, the decline and the range-bound time. Just because it happened to play out on a small scale, they're assuming that all of this is the bull run. That's not the case. Here is the first bull run. Here is a decline and a sideways range-bound time, followed by another bull run. It's the same sequence of events. This just played out on a smaller scale. That's why it doesn't really match what is taking place on today's chart. And let me tell you this. If we were doing something like this, we would only be in probably D. Now, the fact that it's moving up and getting above the highs that we've experienced tells me that we're not doing this. This is not what's at play on today's chart. So if this is not what's at play, then what is at play? Well, that's a great question. Let's take a look at a bull run. So just real quick, I made the claim that if we were doing the decline, we would potentially be in fractal D. So this is from 2018. If we copied this fractal and pasted it on today's chart, it would look something like this. So as you can see, this move up does not comport to what this overall fractal suggests. This is why I believe we are potentially doing something different. So what we're going to do is we're going to analyze these bull run structures, namely this bull run structure, because if we're still in a bull run, then we should be following a bull run structure from the past. So in order to examine the XRP bull run structures, we should first understand what an XRP bull run structure does. So this is the end of the sideways range-bound time. It's that third range-bound structure. So price begins to move up drastically, and it eventually comes to a point where it has a large pullback that is larger than anything that came before it. And as this pullback continues to evolve, it eventually develops into really a classic kind of pullback structure that you would see in a bull run. So this is the first corrective structure that takes place in an XRP bull run. As it moves up, it gets above the high of this first corrective structure. It then enters into the second corrective structure. So the unique thing about this structure is that it has two corrections. It has a lower correction and an upper correction. Now, either of these two can be the larger of the two, and this time it played out to where this one was the smaller one, the upper one. It eventually moves up aggressively and enters into the third corrective structure. Now, typically what tends to happen is it pulls back and does another bull run corrective structure before eventually bottoming out and working its way up to the peak. Now, on the way to the peak, once it gets above the high of this third corrective structure, you can actually count on a small time frame, like an hour time frame. Let's do it. Okay, so here is the top of that third corrective structure. Let's zoom in to this part right here. So you can count 7 moves that brings it to the peak. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this wave right here, this smaller wave, is considered part of this structure because it's in the shadow of this part right here. So all of this is 1. So we do have 7 moves that brings it to a peak. So that is an argument to say that this is the bull run peak. Now, it is possible that this is doing something slightly different. We know that this is not a declining structure because we just examined how it's breaking the declining structure pattern that takes place in a decline from a bull run peak. Let's zoom out a little more. So it is possible, and this is the way I am thinking right now, that this entire structure is the third corrective structure. Now, this would just be absolutely massive if that is the case. However, there are instances in XRP's history where one of the 3 corrective structures tends to be much larger than the other ones. So an example of this would be this first corrective structure in this 2017 bull run. This is the bull run that comes before the structure that everyone is comparing to. So in this one, see how large this one is compared to some of these other ones. In fact, this is on a day candle. You can't even see the third corrective structure on this day candle. So we do have historical precedent of one of these corrective structures being much larger than the others. This is not the only one. This is just to show you that this does exist. Okay, so here we are back at today's chart. Now, if this is truly doing something like that, where it's a very large iteration of the third corrective structure, do we have a bull run structure from the past that matches what's taking place today? Because we can't use a declining structure if we're in a bull run. We can't use a range-bound structure if we're in a bull run. So that limits us to previous bull run structures. Well, we're in luck. If we take this second corrective structure and copy and paste it onto today's chart, it would look something like this. Now, I have taken this and stretched it to match the timing, height, and depth starting from the peak, because that's where this starts from the peak. So if we are doing something like this, now, even with me stretching it to match the timing, height, and depth, it still doesn't really capture the full extent of what's taken place. This pullback takes place on today's chart, but it was much larger on today's chart. But you could see that overall, it does the basic concept. You have this peak, it does a bounce to a trough, and then it kind of does all the parts and pieces that make up this second corrective structure. So if this continues to play out, this move up should, in theory, be potentially reflected in this fractal. Well, if we were to copy this move up on a lower time frame and paste it here, it would look something like this. Let's zoom in on this structure. So as you can see, so far, it seems like it could potentially be doing something like this blue fractal. So if something like that is at play, eventually it's going to make it above the high of that third corrective structure. Let me show you what the move up to the peak could look like. So you see this green line, that's the peak of this structure. So if we move to where we are today, we could see that now it could play out different than this. This is just speculation. It gives you a visual of what could potentially be at play. So once it gets above that green line, that's when we start counting the 7 moves to the peak. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, this would be considered one. And the way it may play out in real life is this, even though this looks smaller, in real life, this could be taller, just like I showed you in the other one where this one ends up in the shadow of this one. Who knows? This is all speculation, but I'm just showing you how something like this could play out. So this would be potentially the highest peak. These would be lower. In fact, after the initial peak, XRP does 2 smaller peaks, and then it goes into its decline. So that's what these 2 smaller, or these 2 other peaks could potentially be. They could be smaller peaks. Of course, this is just speculation, but I want to give you a visual on what it could look like. Now, I don't know how this will play out. I don't know how high it will go. It could be higher than this. It could be lower than this. Either way, whether it's higher or lower, it should, once it gets above this high right here, the current all-time high, we would have 7 moves, and those moves would be visible on a small time frame, on an hour candle or less. So you don't want to be on a day candle because you'll miss it. So anyways, this is speculation, but it is grounded and rooted in history. This is what XRP bull runs do at the peak. They always do this. You can go back and watch some of my other XRP bull run videos where I discuss this. You can watch this video where I show you. How this all plays out is yet to be seen. Now, I could be wrong. It could turn around and start continuing on the decline. That would not be cool. Right now, just how high this has gone tells me that, or I think at least, I think we are not doing a declining structure. And if we aren't doing a declining structure, we'd be doing a bull run structure. If we're doing a bull run structure, this blue fractal is a good match. And if it just continues to play out, it could be something like this. There's a lot of ifs, but I think it's grounded in reality. You don't have to buy into this thinking, but put it this way. If this is still in the bull run and we are going to the peak, we have no other option. In fact, we can copy this bull run structure from 2017/18 onto today's chart. Let's do that. So you can see that it does what it should do. It follows the 2017/18 bull run structure, and that's because this is a typical bull run structure. Now, this pullback is the third corrective structure, but whoa, if it's playing out this large, well, hey. And then from here, it goes to the peak. Once it gets above the high of that third corrective structure, there's 7 moves, and you get to the peak. So there you have it. I know this is probably not news that many of you want to hear, but it is rooted in reality. I hope I made a case disproving that 2017 fractal is not what's at play here. The only real option we have is a bull run structure, and the only option we have is us being in this third corrective structure, which would mean that the peak, if there is a peak and we're in a bull run, that the peak is not far off. Well, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, it'd be much appreciated if you hit that thumbs up button. You know, this is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. You need to do your own research, stand on your own convictions. If you did enjoy this video and you'd like to see more of this type of analysis, I recommend hitting that subscribe button if you haven't done so yet. And if you so desire, I have a Discord that's connected to a Patreon. I'll put a link to my Patreon in the description of this video. I'm active there. It's the best way to keep in touch with me. If we're in this bull run, I'm going to be counting these 7 moves to the peak as it plays out in real time on my Discord. You're welcome to join. It's a $5 a month subscription. I'm so glad you caught this video. I hope you catch my next one. Have a good day, and bye for now.